Schold. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Aloha United Way. We appreciate you making the time to join us today as we share the launch of our ALICE Benefits Cliff tool. We are very excited about this partnership. Aloha United Way has been working with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and the San Francisco Reserve Bank, along with the Office of Housing and Urban Development here in Honolulu. Before we start, I'd just like to say a quick special thanks to Ramona Malini from HUD and our Honolulu field office for supporting this effort and helping to bring this tool to Hawaii with Aloha United Way. I have a couple of quick announcements that we'd like to make as everyone's getting settled in. First, there will be a link in the, chat. If you could sign up on the Google Sheet, that will give us a way to stay in contact with you. And second, we will have a quick poll on which industry you're representing today. I would appreciate it if you take just a quick moment to answer that as those pop up in the chat. Last, we will send out the presentation today to everybody, so there's no need to scramble and take lots of notes or photo shots of what comes up on the screen. We'll have that prepared for you and send out at the end of the webinar. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here today. For Aloha United Way, we're extremely excited about this tool. We believe this is one thing in our arsenal that we can help to improve conditions for ALICE families. And we're very hopeful that this will be of great value to households who may be faced with difficult decisions around benefits, for policymakers and how they can think about what's implemented in our community, and certainly for the service providers who help so many people in our community every day. So thank you very much for everyone who's here. Thank you to our hosts from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and San Francisco, and of course to HUD. I'd like to now pass it over to Lisa Kimura, who is our Vice President of Community Impact, and she'll introduce our speakers for today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is a really exciting announcement for us. We've been working for quite some time now, talking with our partners at the Federal Reserve Banks in Atlanta and San Francisco, as well as with our local HUD office. And big thanks once again for everybody for all the work so far, and thank you for being here. First, before we get started with a formal presentation, just want to remind you one more time, please go ahead and sign in so we know who is here and we can send you the presentation afterwards. Additionally, I'd like to open it up with a poll, a short poll for everybody real quick, just to let us know who is here and to share with others what industry you are from. You'll see the poll pop up on your screen shortly. And as that is coming up, I just want to thank everyone again for being here and for your interest in this presentation. So if you could, up on the screen, you'll see the options. Number one, please select which industry best describes your representation. And then please also select which ALICE impact areas your organization or program currently addresses. We'll just give folks just about 30 seconds. If you could please fill in those poll questions. Okay, well, we're waiting for that. Let's go ahead and get started with our formal presentation. All right, once again, I want to thank everybody for being here, and we're very excited to share this with you today. So first of all, who is ALICE? Of course, ALICE is not a person. ALICE is an acronym. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And these are the hardworking individuals and households in our state who are working often multiple jobs, but really not able to make ends meet. Aloha United Way has been publishing ALICE reports. We had our second report come out in 2020. The following report will be coming out next year, and it really studies at a deep level what is going on for individuals and what financial hardship really looks like. So first of all, it's important to note that prior to COVID, 42% of our households across the state were considered ALICE or below. What we noticed too in our report was that the cost of living has been increasing. I think that's no surprise to many of us here, but worker vulnerability has also been growing while wages stagnated. And unfortunately, and especially through COVID, the number of ALICE households has been on the rise. Our incomes by household have been relatively static as far as the poverty rate from our prior to our first report until the data collected in the last. But as you can see, the number of ALICE households has increased. What's more, the consumer price index has been outpaced by the ALICE Essentials Index. ALICE Essentials are defined by things that people need to absolutely survive. This right here is what a survival budget looks like for those at various levels. So for example, taxes being a requirement, technology, healthcare, transportation, food, childcare, and housing. Of course, childcare and housing being the top two expenses for households that have children. For a family of 4 to survive with 2 children in the home, they would need an annual total of a little over $90,000 to make it. We also have a survival budget for a single adult at $31,000, and for seniors who have additional often healthcare costs, the survival budget is about $34,308. However, when you look at what the average retail wage is, which is one of our most populated segments of careers in our state, they pay an average of $13.03 an hour, which only equates to $26,000 a year, which is certainly not enough to make it as a single adult. And even with 2 adults working full time, not even close to what people are going to need to survive. The unfortunate thing is too, and what we're looking at and why we're so interested in this tool is how we can adjust and how we can address some of these underpaying wages to help people get by and make it through ALICE here. High wage jobs have decreased, unfortunately. High wage is defined by jobs that can support a family with 1 earner. Medium wage jobs are defined by people who have 2 earners. The number of those has decreased, and the only increase, as mentioned, was in low wage jobs, which unfortunately are not able to support a household survival budget. You can see here too, this is a breakdown by the occupations in Hawaii by the average wage, as well as the frequency with which these jobs occur. So those jobs at the very top, which we consider those that are innovating, those that are creating new industry, we have very few. They do tend to pay better. But for our infrastructurers, our nurturers, those who are working to help our economy keep going, to build houses, to take care of people, to provide healthcare services, many of those jobs pay very little and unfortunately are very, very frequent here. The other unfortunate disparity is there are clear differences between demographics for people that are below and above the ALICE threshold. Unfortunately, for many that are young, under 25 years old, 87% are ALICE. As well, what's very remarkable is compared to the average single female-headed households with children, 80% of them are ALICE and below. Single male-headed, 61%, and our Native Hawaiian population, 53% are considered ALICE and below. Again, that data is prior to COVID, but what we do know is that the COVID economic shock was severe. We had an estimated 59% of ALICE households after the impact of COVID. Although we've recovered greatly in terms of our unemployment rates, we still had tens of thousands of families that have slipped into ALICE and have not fully recovered. So what are we doing for ALICE? Well, one, Aloha United Way started the ALICE Fund several years ago, and the impetus for this was to be able to invest in nonprofit agencies and programs that are developing impactful and scalable programs. We had a vast variety, everything from home ownership and new homes to job skilling, upskilling throughout the community. And what we're very excited about moving forward in the next 3 years of this ALICE Fund and the United for ALICE project is that we have partnered with Hawaii Community Foundation. We're very, very excited to have this participation because it's going to help us be more impactful in terms of tackling those issues that are bringing hardship for families and individuals. We can bring people together, look at resources and solutions. We do believe that this is going to help our community become stronger and more resilient. And with the partnership with HCF, having a very long history in working in this area of community resilience, we are very hopeful for some big change. So as far as those big changes, part of it has to do with collective impact work. And our vision for all grantees and all participants that are working on the United for Alice front is that we are bringing together people, organizations, and sectors to provoke action and create change in ways that matter to Alice populations. We're doing that through a collective impact lens. What that means is together, we're working with the community to have a common agenda and a common understanding of the problem and how we together are going to share that vision for change. Part of that comes through collecting data and measuring results. This is where the Alice Benefits Cliff dashboard comes into play. One, it is an excellent way for us to be able to measure performance, measure accountability, and measure impact for change. By coordinating mutually reinforcing activities, we are working together through a joint plan of action with our community partners, working on continuous communication so that we have consistent, open discussion about what is going on and how we can build trust amongst each other. And finally, the role that AUW is playing, and again, in coordination with Hawaii Community Foundation right now, is providing backbone support. And moving forward, and again, in particular, using this dashboard tool to help us with that data management and measuring our results, is providing that backbone support to our community partners. This collective impact theory shows us that one intervention is not enough. We need to have various partners coordinating efforts to create sustained systems change. When we have the tools, when we have the conversations, when we have the initiatives, we can create collective progress, but we can't do it alone. No industry can do it alone. And we have to have the potential to push the system across the tipping point. Again, this is where the dashboard tool is going to come in greatly impactful. As we move forward, 2022 through 24 is a 3-year period in looking at our Alice Collective Impact work. We are focusing on 2 key priority areas within interventions that can potentially influence a larger system. 1 is affordable housing, and 2 is financial stability and savings. And for those that are involved in the Alice work, you may be quite familiar with this impetus moving forward, but the prioritization on these areas are to help us focus and help us make some real significant change. Our goals coming out, we're going to decrease the number of households who are Alice, reduce the duration of time people are Alice, and create clear and easily accessed pathways to greater economic prosperity. So how is this tool going to help us? Well, what we know is that systems mapping and community engagement informs our work. We cannot do this if we're not doing it together and we're not coordinated and our resources aren't cooperative. We need to use it to help us continually learn and adapt how we address these complex interrelated causes of inequities and how we can help people gain upward mobility. This is critical to helping place our Alice efforts up front and at the center of community conversations. We're hoping to forge new partnerships. And one of the great opportunities with this dashboard is for us to be able to talk to businesses, elected officials, and other community leaders to help them understand what is going on for Alice and help them see what kind of opportunities exist. And finally, what we hope is using this information and using our partnerships that our community and philanthropic resources are aligned and expanded so that we have an environment where every family and individual is thriving. We want people to be able to weather those acute and chronic hardships and to be able to live a life here that is satisfying and not such a struggle. And with that said, I just want to emphasize at the heart of everything that we do and at the heart of why we're bringing this tool is community. We need to have everybody coming together and talking and understanding where we intersect and how we can accomplish those results together. So with that, once again, I want to thank our partners, and I want to turn it over to Alex Reuter, who is with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, to tell you more about this tool and how it works.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and everyone. It's great to be here today and introduce this new tool to you. Just give me one moment as I share my screen with everyone. All right. As I said, it's an honor to be here today in partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco to talk about this work we've been doing with the Aloha United Way, with HUD in Hawaii, to really bring this Benefits Cliff tool to the state. Now, the title of the talk is called Benefits Cliffs, Alice, and Economic Mobility. So what I want to suggest to everyone today before I get started with the talk is what is the value add of this tool for you, right? So there's a lot of tools on the market. There's even a lot of Benefits Cliff tools on the market. What is the value add for you? And what I'm going to present today for you is a case that what makes this tool different is the integration of benefits cliffs, ALICE, and economic mobility into a single tool. Right, so there's a lot of other ways you can try to understand economic mobility or ALICE or benefits cliffs separately. What we're going to do is look at one unified way to look at that, all three of these concepts together in a single tool, so that we can meet the goal that Lisa just put on the slides about financial stability, right, and financial security for families. Looking at a more holistic financial picture, we're going to get a better sense on, well, what families are not at that level of financial stability right now, and then what is it going to take, and what are the opportunities to get families over these ALICE thresholds so that they are stable. So my talk today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through very carefully for you really an argument about why this integration of ALICE and benefits cliffs is really important, particularly for everyone on the call today that's involved in planning strategies to promote financial stability and ultimately economic mobility. I'm going to then give you a demonstration of the new tool, which is live and available for anyone to demo and start using. And then I'll conclude with some of the use cases, further use cases for the tool. And I can talk a little bit about training and other opportunities for anyone that's interested. Okay. So let's get started. And I want to start with, to begin, and I know this is maybe review for some of the attendees on the call, but it's important to remember first why benefits cliffs may be a really important issue when we're looking at ALICE. Okay. So let's begin. How do benefits cliffs affect economic mobility? Right. I think we've all perhaps heard of benefits cliffs. We've heard them discussed, but materially, how do they really prevent or create a barrier to economic mobility? Let's look at an example. On your screen right now is a very typical way to look at a benefits cliff. And let's just go through this chart very carefully so we can all be sure that we understand what's going on. Let's all begin at the bottom of this chart where it says employment income. What this is showing us is, starting at the left-hand side of the chart, we're going from $0 to $80,000 of annual employment income. On the vertical side of this chart, you see net resources. That's family net resources. All that is a more comprehensive measure of the financial resources available to a family. The way we calculate that is we include employment income, we include public assistance, and we subtract the family's expenses and the taxes they have to pay, federal and state. So think about it in a way like disposable income. What disposable income is available to a family? Unfortunately, what this chart shows, and you can see this very clearly, is that as we go from left to right, income going from $0 to $80,000, this family's total financial well-being is not going up at the same rate. It's very obvious, in fact, that this particular family has a large benefits cliff at about $49,000 a year. In this case, it's so severe that at $49,000 a year, that family's net financial well-being drops by about $10,000. And it ultimately puts this family at the exact same level of financial resources they had when they were making about $14,000 a year. And that's what these red arrows are connecting for you. So we often may have thought, well, we've taken a family and moved them into a $49,000 a year job. Certainly, we've increased financial stability and economic mobility. But when we look at this more holistic measure of benefits cliffs, as you see on the screen right now, it's very evident that we, in fact, did not improve that family's financial well-being. In fact, we might have set them back to where they were when they were only earning $14,000 per year. I think this is beginning ultimately to show you why the benefits cliffs can be a significant barrier for efforts to move families at or above the ALICE stability or survival budget. And we'll talk about that shortly in this presentation. But let's just, again, continue on with this idea of why are benefits cliffs worth your time to look at and take seriously in your efforts to plan your community strategies for economic mobility. This is the benefits cliffs. Let's talk about one other barrier that the social safety net can create. It's called the benefits plateau. So here we have a very similar situation. We have employment income on the bottom, and we have net family resources on the vertical axis. Now, this is a little bit different. We have that same benefits cliff. This time it's at about $51,000 a year. But notice instead what's happening for this family from the point of $25,000 a year out to about $48,000 a year. This is what we call the benefits plateau. This chart is showing you that for this particular family, we move them from $25,000 a year to $48,000 a year of income. But their net financial well-being, their financial resources, once you account for public assistance that's lost, has absolutely stagnated. There's been no positive gain at all. So they haven't formally hit a benefits cliff. There's no real benefits cliff here, but the gradual loss of multiple programs can create this benefits plateau situation you see right here. For any of you that have worked with families and they've reported to you concerns or perceived feelings of stagnation in their financial well-being, as some of the families that I talk to when I'm out in the field tell me that this term stagnation actually comes up to me more often than benefits cliff. What you're seeing right now is stagnation, the benefits plateau. So the reason why I wanted to show these two charts to open up today is to just refresh everyone's memory on why these are critical issues to consider. But then it's going to really motivate, well, why do we need a tool to be able to understand for families that are trying to increase their economic mobility in Hawaii and move past these ALICE thresholds? How are these issues going to interact with our strategies, right? The cliffs and the plateau. All right. Now, this leads to an obvious question. How do we promote career advancement and economic mobility? So for families that are in that ALICE category, right, what are our strategies to move them, either increase their financial stability, but then of course, ultimately move them beyond ALICE into a position of financial security? I want to start out with a couple quotes from the Aloha United Way's recent 2020 ALICE report. The first, our ALICE population represents hardworking people we interact with every day who have a job, or two or three, yet cannot afford basic necessities to remain stable and self-sufficient. ALICE are doing everything they can to make ends meet, yet struggle to get by each month. Why is this quote important? Because it points out that being below that ALICE threshold is a position of financial insecurity and stress. So strategies are going to often look at two particular goals: increasing the stability of these families that are below ALICE, but then of course, having a longer term strategy that moves workers up the economic ladder and beyond ALICE. Why again is this important? From the same report, the 2020 ALICE report indicates that there has been, unfortunately, no improvement since 2010 in the number of ALICE in Hawaii, despite steady overall economic improvements. So why is this quote important? Because it's pointing out that there ultimately is a goal, right? That many organizations are going to share, certainly the ones we partner with, to move families from below that ALICE threshold to above the ALICE threshold, right? That movement is ultimately what's going to reduce the number of families that are below ALICE, right? And this quote just illustrates why that's an important goal. So what are some of the common strategies that increase economic mobility and they can move workers above that ALICE threshold? A very common strategy I'm going to talk about in workforce development that many of you on the call probably in some way are a part of is career pathways. This is an example of a career pathway model. And this is, in fact, a model that can be put forward as a way to move families from below ALICE to above ALICE. Okay? This career pathway model is from a national study that was done on the healthcare career pathway from the Administration for Children and Families. It's called HPOG. Maybe some of you on the call were a part of this program. The logic of this model, and forgive me if this is a review for most of you, is the following. At the top of this chart is the entry-level occupation. In this case, it's a certified nursing assistant. Typically requires a few weeks of education or training, And then a worker can move into an entry-level job in a sector, in this case, healthcare, that has a promising upward economic trajectory within the organization and sector. So for example, we can start out at the top, certified nursing assistant, entry level, not going to be paying an Alice wage more than likely. But the worker has options in a career pathway model. They could go to the left side of your screen, maybe get some enhanced CNA training, become a medication aide, an EKG technician, a phlebotomist, a dialysis technician. Earnings will go up, maybe or maybe not. That would put them above the Alice threshold. They could even go further and enter non-nursing occupations. That's that orange box at the bottom of your screen. Medical billing and coding, emergency medical technician, or pharmacy tech. These are good jobs. And an alternative that we're going to look at today is the right side of your screen. Can the worker go from that entry-level CNA, go back to school, maybe do an on-the-job training series of courses, and become a licensed practical nurse, earning more money, potentially getting to that Alice survival budget, or even move to a registered nurse, which is more than likely going to move that family beyond that survival budget. Now, the question I want to pose for all of us today and what we're going to look at is really twofold. First, does this career pathway offer promising approaches to get families beyond the Alice budget? Then two, we can kind of talk about this in a very general sense as we are right now. Or we can say, well, let's look at the families that our organization perhaps actually serves. And those families may be on public assistance. How does this career pathway in Hawaii look like for families that are on public assistance that we want to move above the Alice threshold? Right, so we're going to look at those two questions in the next few slides. Let's begin. Does this career path help Alice? So number one, we're going to start out, and again, this is where we're going to start integrating in the logic of the fantastic Alice tools that are available and how the Cliff dashboard can supplement that information for you. So let's begin with the United for Alice wage tool. This is a very useful resource, and it's going to allow us to understand a little bit at a high level what wage gets families above Alice, and then what are some jobs that may get workers to that point. So to begin, this is a screenshot from the United for Alice wage tool. I've selected the state of Hawaii, and I've actually, on the right side of your screen, it says select hourly wage. And I've actually put the maximum hourly wage of $25 an hour into this tool. So what this screenshot is telling us is, can each of these counties, you can see the 5 Hawaii counties listed on this tool at the bottom, can the $25 an hour support a family of 2, 1 adult, 1 child? Can this money support them above that Alice survival budget? What this $25 an hour and what this tool is telling us, and notice on the right side of this table, we see yes for Hawaii and no for the other 4. So the $25 an hour will get a family above Alice in Hawaii and Hawaii County, but it looks like the answer is no for the other 4. So we've maxed out the wage at $25 an hour. We can see even for a 1-child family, this is not getting workers above the Alice threshold in 4 out of the 5 Hawaii counties. When you go into the data a little bit more and you look at the Alice report, you learn that, well, that threshold is actually just a little bit above $25 an hour. It's more like 27 an hour. So we're close, but not there completely. So to summarize, what we have here is at $25 an hour, we may be close to the Alice survival budget for 1 adult, 1 child. Okay. Now the next important question, well, what can those healthcare jobs, are they going to get us to this $25 an hour threshold, or even slightly above it? That's important to know if we want that career pathway to get us to economic mobility for the Alice population. Right. So again, this is screen 1 from the Alice wage tool. Now we're going to go, well, what jobs in Hawaii can get us there? Okay. To begin, Let's imagine we have a hypothetical worker in Hawaii and we're going to go through a case study with this in the demonstration of the tool. Let's say they're starting out in a service sector job, probably entry level. So from that same United for Alice wage tool, which is available on the Aloha United Way website, we can start out by looking, let's say that we have a worker that's a waiter or a waitress. What this tool here is showing us is for all the workers in Hawaii, for the entire state in this case, how many workers are earning below $25 an hour, right? And you can see that actually in this case, waiters and waitresses, there's about 3,400 waiters and waitresses are earning below $25 an hour, and about 10,000 are above $25 an hour. So this is actually looking like, well, if we have a worker that's in the food services industry or the service sector, there's a pretty good chance they'd earn $25 an hour and get to that Alice survival budget, again, for a single adult with one child. Now let's imagine we were moving that worker onto a healthcare career path. Okay? Nursing assistant, this is that first step of the career pathway. Nursing assistant, notice this is again, United Way, Alice wage tool, same state, same $25 an hour threshold. Notice that at the entry level, the vast majority of workers are below the $25 an hour threshold. 3,800 earn less than $25 an hour, in other words, below the survival budget. 243, only 243 earn above. So what that is telling us is that that first rung on this healthcare career ladder is likely not going to get this worker to Alice. What about the second rung? Remember, licensed practical nurse. So when we use the Alice tool and in the wage tool, we look at LPN, remember the second rung on the career path. We have 330 workers are below the $2,500 threshold, $25 an hour threshold, excuse me. 606 are above. Again, what is this telling us? It's telling us that if that worker goes from nursing assistant to LPN, there's a better chance they're going to make above that Alice survival budget. What about the final rung in that career pathway, registered nurse? Using the same tool, notice that what this is telling us is that for registered nurses in Hawaii, none are earning below the $25 an hour threshold. 11,264 registered nurses in Hawaii are above that $25 an hour threshold. What is that telling us? Is that if this worker gets to RN, they are almost certain to be above that Alice survival budget. So what did we just see here? Again, let's go back to the career path. We started as certified nursing assistant. That did not look like a path to Alice to stay at CNA. But if that can lead to higher paying jobs, then it's more promising. LPN, we saw about 2/3 or so were above the $25 an hour threshold. Registered nurse, all were. So the career pathway here looks like it can get someone to Alice, but staying at CNA is not going to be an option. So where's the CLIF tool come in? And this is where we're going to transition into the demonstration. The CLIF tool comes in because all we're doing right now is looking at wages. How do we begin to look at that worker's total financial well-being? Because if the total financial well-being doesn't improve, we have to ask two questions. Number one, are we actually increasing worker financial stability? Or are we actually making that worker worse off or destabilizing them such that we're not achieving our organizational goals of improving worker outcomes? We have to look at the total financial picture to begin to answer those questions. So let's move to our demonstration. Let's use a case study. I'm going to use a case study, which is actually based on a real person. An application, we're going to use our case of someone named Leah. Let's assume Leah is a 25-year-old single parent, very much modeled after the scenario we were just looking at in the United Way wage tool. She has one child, age 4, and she lives in Honolulu. We'll just use that for simplicity. Let's say she is working in a full-time job right now, likely in the service sector that pays near the minimum wage. She wants to go into that healthcare career pathway because she thinks that this is an opportunity to stabilize her family financially and get to the ALICE threshold. Okay? So what is that path going to look like for her? Right? Again, imagine she walks into a job training center or a community organization that's involved in financial coaching or career coaching. She asks about this healthcare career pathway, and she's asking every one of us. So if everyone puts on their career or financial coaching hats, she wants to know, will this career pathway pay off for her and get her to financial stability and above the ALICE threshold? What makes this case a little bit different is we're going to assume that Leia's on public assistance. And in fact, when you look at the data, many workers that participate in the workforce development system and that are engaged in nonprofits are on public assistance to help them make their ends meet. So this is going to provide actually a more realistic scenario on what that financial payoff will be. So let's assume that in this case, Leia is receiving a set of public assistance and tax credits. So we're going to assume here that Leia is receiving food assistance through the SNAP program, healthcare assistance, Medicaid for her children. And let's say she's also receiving housing assistance and some common tax credits, such as the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. All right. So the key questions that we need to consider for Leia, remember, we have our career coaching hats on, are the following two questions. Will this career choice offer a path to the ALICE threshold? Will this increase financial ability? Will this promote economic mobility? And then finally, what will the financial barriers be for Leia on this career path, so we can help mitigate those barriers? This graphic here is just showing Leia, as she's thinking about her career path, pondering all the various issues and barriers she really has to think about in this career choice, from housing to healthcare to food to policy. It's a very complex web of issues Leia has to navigate to go into this career pathway. So I'm going to pause right now, and first off, I can see if any of the Q&A questions come in, but otherwise we're going to transition right now to show you how the Hawaii Cliff dashboard can help us understand exactly what Leia's situation is going to be in Hawaii. All right, so if there are no questions in, we are going to go to the demonstration. Just a moment. Just a moment, everyone, as I switch my screen. I apologize. Just one moment. My internet's a little bit slow. It's going to take just a second to transition here.
Alex, and while you're bringing that up, we just had a question from the audience asking if this data was based on 2018, 2019 data.
That is the most recent available from the ALICE tool. So I believe that would be the 2020.
Thank you.
Again, folks, I apologize. I might have to restart my Firefox browser because it seems to be frozen. Just a moment.
And while Alex is bringing that up, just a reminder for anybody, if you do have questions, please go ahead and drop it into the Q&A box, and we will be happy to queue those up for you and share those results or share the questions at the end. Just also while he's restarting, just to share some information on our audience today. We're again so glad you're here. About 77% of you are from the nonprofit industry, which is fantastic. Many of you I see are also on partners already with our Alice work, which is fantastic. 15% of our audience right now are from government. And so we thank you for being here, and we are very excited to be able to share with you how we can use this and how it can help inform some of those data informed decisions that you make. And we have 8% from the business industry. And of course, it's incredibly important for our business partners, both small and large business, to understand what the impact of Alice is, how you can help support in many ways. Certainly, of course, wages are one of them, but there is a lot more to it. And for those that have indicated which areas of Alice impact that your organization or program addresses, 13% of you are working on safe and affordable housing, which is one of our 2 primary focus areas these next 3 years. And 28% of you are working on financial stability and savings. 41% of you are working on both of those areas, and 18% not yet either. So we look forward to being able to work with you more closely on programs moving forward.
All right, I apologize for that delay. I've had some pretty significant internet issues today, so I apologize. Now let's just to recap where we were. We were looking at Leia's case, and we were really interested in this healthcare career pathway. It looks promising from the perspective of the wage tool data. Now we're going to look at how this tool, how our career path is going to look in the context of that public assistance loss. So what you see on your screen right now is the home page of the Hawaii Cliff dashboard. To begin with, we can see at the center of the screen, we just have our instructions, and you can see 3 tabs at the top. We have the welcome screen, we have the results tab, which we will go through in detail. We have the for policymakers tab, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. That's really for those of you that want to use this kind of information for more policy work, as many of our partners do. And then frequently asked questions. Moving to the left side of your screen, you can see a drop-down menu list. And this is where you're going to have all the functionality of this tool available to you. Of course, to start out at the top of the menu, you can see the state menu. Of course, it is set to Hawaii. The second option here is county. So we want to choose what of the counties that we are going to focus on in the tool. The reason this is important is because within this tool, all the information is localized. So the cost of living, the public assistance rules, the wage data, it's going to be very specific to the locality. So you're going to want to be very intentional with your choice about geography. Next options are family type and public assistance. This is where you're going to be able to choose, what is the case study of the family you want to look at, right? So if you think about the Alice report, if you've read the Alice report, it often presents the data in a few different ways, such as what's the Alice budget for a single parent without children, a single parent with one child, 2, 3, 4 children, for example. The case we looked at today is the single adult, 1 child, age 4, right? And that's Leia. That's our Leia case. You can next choose, well, what public assistance is Leia on? You have the opportunity in this tool to default to all programs in the database, no programs, maybe the worker is on no public assistance at all, or you can select a custom list. And that's in fact the most common option because most workers, as many of you know, are not on all public assistance programs. That's very, very rare if ever happens at all. So you really want to target the choices to who you're either serving as a direct service provider or who you really want to investigate from a public policy perspective. Leia, remember, was on food assistance, Leah was receiving healthcare assistance, so Medicaid, I'm going to choose Medicaid and children's health insurance. Leah was receiving the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit and housing assistance. Right? If we wanted to, we could choose from the rest of this list. We have free and reduced price school meals, women, infant, and children's nutrition program, child care subsidy, Head Start, early Head Start, state-funded pre-kindergarten, the health insurance marketplace, and then the CDCTC, or the Child Independent Care Tax Credit. So all these rules are in this tool, up to date, and allow you to see, for any career we choose, how will earnings gains affect the path on these careers. Okay. The final selection of dropdowns here are the occupations. Now, this data set this tool uses the Bureau of Labor Statistics local wage data for its wage data. Now, the occupations are organized according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or maybe some of you have used the system called ONET. That is exactly organized as it is in this tool. So let's first choose the broad occupational group that Leah wants to get to. So remember, Leah wants to begin by looking at that licensed practical nurse position, the LPN. So I've chosen LPN. The next is, well, does the LPN require any education to become an LPN? Yes, it does. You have three options here. You can choose the typical education required to become an LPN. You can enter a custom duration. Maybe you know from a local community college, for example, how long the program is. You can enter it there. Or sometimes the worker would not need any education or training, and you could also choose that. But we're going to choose the typical duration. We want to compare the LPN to another occupation on that career pathway, which is just that nursing assistant role. So again, to summarize, what do we have? We're looking in Hawaii, so we're going to be looking at Honolulu, just like that Leah case. Single adult, one child, age 4, that's on food assistance, healthcare assistance, the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, and housing assistance. Wants to aspirationally, the target occupation, become an LPN to get closer to that ALICE budget. Compare it to that first rung on the career pathway, which is the nursing assistant. So remember, the key goal we're going to do with this exercise is, will this career pathway move the worker above ALICE, and what, if any, will the financial barriers be on that path? So let's look at the results. So clicking that results tab, this is what information we're going to use to understand the impact on the job seeker or family. We'll start out with the first chart, individual income before taxes. What do you see on the screen here? So notice that at the bottom of this chart, we have year going from 2022 out to 2046. And on the vertical axis, we have just annual employment income according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, going from 0 to $60,000. On the chart, you have two lines drawn. We have first, the nursing assistant. Second, the licensed practical nurse. In 2022, both of these occupations are in school, so they would be working part-time and going to school. Year 1, the licensed practical nurse is estimated, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to earn about $46,000 a year, compared to that nursing assistant at about $32,000 a year. Going left to right, everyone, you can notice these lines kind of curve up. That's wage growth over time. So what also sets this CLIF tool apart for you is that this is looking at an overtime career perspective. We're not just looking at wage gains tomorrow. We want to be able to convey to workers, and from a workforce planning, economic development planning context, what's this career going to pay off for the worker and the taxpayer? So we can very clearly see that LPN moving up over time, right? It's a better prospect in the nursing assistant. Chart 2, how does this relate to ALICE? And this is one of the unique features of this partnership, is that we're able to integrate the Alice survival budget directly into this tool. So the next chart, the Alice survival budget. Now the chart looks very similar here. We have the same overtime perspective. We have the gold nursing assistant line, and we have the red licensed practical nurse line. What's a little bit different here is that we're looking now at after-tax income, and we're overlaying the Alice survival budget. That's this gray line here. The Alice survival budget for this particular family, single adult with one child, starts out at about $46,000 a year. And then over time, you can see that gray line go down. So as this family and their child ages, that survival budget will go down as well. Well, what's important here? The important thing is, first, that nursing assistant, just like we saw in the United Way wage tool, that nursing assistant is actually not close to Alice. And it's actually going to be almost, it looks like not till about 2037 when that family's child leaves the home, assumed to leave the home, that only then would they be above the Alice threshold. Let's contrast that to the LPN, and let's look at the LPN alone. So the licensed practical nurse, even at the starting wage right here in 2023, is actually just shy of the Alice survival budget. So it's a much better prospect here to move into that LPN role if we're ultimately concerned about getting this family to the Alice threshold. So they don't necessarily cross it, at least according to these estimates, until about 2032. But it's very clear this is a much better position than the nursing assistant. Everything we've seen so far, I would argue, corresponds to what we saw with the United Way wage tool. Very few nursing assistants are above the Alice threshold, if any. LPN, you have a much better chance of being above the Alice survival budget, even in Hawaii, which is a higher cost county. Okay. The tool does allow you to see, well, what's in that gray line? What is the Alice survival budget? This is just going to show you the breakdown for every year. What are these families' expenses? So for example, year one, we have the Alice childcare expenses at about $8,000 a year. We have healthcare, we have food, housing, transportation, miscellaneous expenses, and technology. That's the Alice survival budget. You can see how over time these expenses change. Food goes up somewhat, and healthcare goes up somewhat. Childcare costs ultimately disappear once the child is over age 13. Okay. Now, this has all been, I think, somewhat of a review. And again, it confirms what we saw in the United Way wage tool. What we're going to introduce now is the power of the CLIF dashboard in Hawaii, which is understanding how this intersects with the public assistance liaison. So first charts we're going to look at here. Let's look at public assistance. Now we're looking at this for the two careers. On the left, we have licensed practical nurse. On the right, we have nursing. Let's look at LPN on the left. So this first year, we can see that LPN is receiving a variety of the programs we chose. So Medicaid, children's health insurance, housing assistance, food assistance, the earned income tax credit, and the child tax credit. If everyone can pay very close attention to what happens going from year 2022 to year 2023. And I want to give everyone just a second to look at that difference between 2022 and 2023. And I want to ask everyone to at least mentally yourself note, well, what public assistance will this worker lose the first 2 years as an LPN? So I'm just going to pause for about 10 seconds to let you take a look at this chart closely. All right. So that is the, we can see that it's actually SNAP, this family loses in 2023. And then housing assistance, the family is roughly going to go down to zero. right off the bat. So it starts out at about 12,000 a year and it goes down to about 990 a year. Right? And I apologize, folks. We're going to switch counties really quick because I chose Hawaii mistakenly. We're looking at the wrong case study. So let's recalculate these results. So just a moment. Oops, sorry, folks. We have an internet issue. Just one more time, just a second.
Alex, and while you're bringing that up again too, we had a couple of questions come in. One was inquiring about if age of first child is the eldest or the youngest, and is there a separate age selection for multiple children?
Yes, so it's really up to you. So you can enter up to right now 3 children in any order. We've expanded that to 4 children. That update will be coming very soon. So in this particular case, it doesn't matter. So first child, if you went up to, since we only have 1 child in this case, it actually doesn't matter. But if we went up to 4 child, you could enter the children in any order. So, you could go from youngest to oldest or oldest to youngest, and it actually wouldn't make a difference.
Thank you. And one other question too, while you're bringing that up, question was if the case studies and CLIFS tool take into consideration Hawaii's prepaid healthcare obligations, meaning for our employees that are working 20 or more hours a week, they do receive healthcare coverage. And the question is, assuming that the Leah case study, because she's receiving Medicaid, that she's only working part-time minimum wage, or is the case study based on full-time work? It's a little complicated answer. I'm not sure if you're.
Yeah, so for the first one, the healthcare option, I think I'd have to go into a little bit more detail on exactly how that program works to answer that one correctly. Maybe we come back to that particular point. On the second one, so what the case study is assuming is that on year 1, this worker would, so let's, if you look at this chart here, in 2022, notice how earnings are at about $10,000 a year, and that's when that worker's on Medicaid. So what we're seeing here is the worker has gone to part-time work so they can go to school full-time in this scenario. So they had been working full-time. So Leah was working full-time in that food services job. They're working part-time here just to finish this training program. And that's just an assumption of this dashboard, right? We could change that assumption if we want, but this is just one way to show what we argue is the cost of schooling, right? You have to, oftentimes families are gonna have to pull back on their work to go to school full-time or go to school part-time and work full-time. This is just one way to show it.
Thank you.
And again, I don't know why I chose Hawaii as a county, everyone. I do apologize for that. So now we're looking at Honolulu, which is where Leah lives. And we can see the big issues here in Honolulu are going to be the loss of health insurance, the loss of SNAP again, a little difference in the housing assistance program. And that's going to be the big difference here. So just looking left to right here, we can see exactly what are potentially going to be the issues for this family. The nursing assistant on the right has more public assistance. Housing is more, particularly due to the housing assistance and the earned income tax credit. So the licensed practical nurse will have no earned income tax credit after 2 years, less housing assistance, and that potentially is going to have an impact for this family. The next chart we look at is going to tell us what that impact would be. So let's go back to, if you think back to the slides I started out with, remember when we were looking at benefits cliffs, benefits plateaus, we were looking at the total financial well-being of this worker, right? So this next chart we're going to look at is another view of that total financial well-being. And this is what we have, right? Now again, net financial resources is total financial well-being for this family. We have, once again, the yellow line is nursing assistant, The red line is the LPN. What's a little bit different here is this $0 threshold. So if any of these lines are above zero, this family will have enough financial resources to cover their basic expenses, which is good news. So once we count public assistance, both of these positions are, both of these careers are allowing that worker to cover their basic expenses. However, it's only due to that additional public assistance, particularly in this case, the value of that housing voucher, right? In a high cost market like Honolulu, right? Now, what are the barriers here? So CNA, we can definitely see a barrier, but let's focus first on LPN. So again, we want to coach this worker to become an LPN. Look at this dark red line here. So again, year one, she's in school, does not have the financial resources she needs to cover her basic expenses. Year two, first year as an LPN, Leia's looking in good position, but year three, there's a drop. Well, that's a benefits cliff, right? So that's the first thing we would probably want to note for Leia here is that, she's going to be better off for sure on this career path. She's getting closer to Alice, but she is going to have to manage a benefits cliff here, really within the first 2 or 3 years of her career. Finally, there's a longer benefits plateau period we can see from about 2024 out to about 2030. Right? So that is two at least short to medium term barriers I would want to flag for Leia. Of course, there's some issues that are to come a little bit later on, and we could come back to that. But let's try to figure out for Leia what's causing these issues right here in this period from about 2023 out to 2030. So going back up to this benefits chart, we can actually see what's happening here. So 2023, that first benefits cliff, remember, that's the year you can see here where the earned income tax credit, almost $3,500 of value, $3,600 is gone, right? So number one, that's the big issue for the earned income tax credit. We also have the housing voucher losing about $300 of value in that period. So that together is going to cause that benefits cliff we see. Now, what about the benefits plateau? Every year, that housing voucher is going to decrease somewhat. Right? You can actually kind of see that going down somewhat, kind of gradually tick up a little bit. But these gradual changes in these programs, right, plus the increases in taxes that this worker is going to have to pay, are creating this benefits plateau situation here. Right? So again, this is the way we present this in our training to coaches that use this tool is you really look at this chart to get a high level awareness on where the barriers will be. Right? If I were thinking about this LPN career pathway here, I would say, it's getting the worker close to Alice. It's getting the worker, at least for particularly workers on housing assistance, it's getting them where they're above the position of financial insecurity when they can't cover their basic expenses. But this worker is going to have to at least be aware of the benefits cliff, right, that we see here on this chart. It is a better payoff, again, for sure, than the nursing assistant job we saw, right? So again, if we look at nursing assistant again, we're advising that worker about the career pathway. Sometimes we hear, and one of my United Way partners in Texas just brought this up today, is sometimes people are afraid to advance because they think they're going to be worse off. This is telling us right here that the LPN will pay off, that you are better off moving into that LPN role than staying as a CNA. It's just managing these barriers that we've identified from about 2024 to 2030 that we'd have to talk through and think about strategically on how to mitigate these the most effectively. Now, other perspectives this tool can have that can support your work with community action and policymakers is this For Policymakers tab. So this tool is fundamentally built on a tax calculator. And what this allows you to do is to understand what will the taxpayer gain when this worker moves from that near minimum wage job to CNA or to LPN. So for example, we can look at this first chart and see the total taxes paid, federal and state, as the worker goes from a nursing assistant and then an LPN. So it's very clear in this chart here that the LPN is paying more, right? More in taxes. So the taxpayer for sure is going to benefit from moving this worker into an LPN role. We can now and finally look at the entire perspective of is this worker, what is going to then be the net gain for the taxpayer once we account taxpayer revenue plus savings in public assistance, right? Because you think about it, as this worker earns more, they're going to be paying more in taxes and using fewer public assistance. And you can actually see here, if everyone just focuses on the right side of your screen, this lifetime bar. What this is telling us is that if the worker goes from a nursing assistant to LPN, the taxpayer will save about $125,000 over the lifetime. Right? That's a pretty significant gain from just a single worker. Right? You can imagine if your program serving 10, 20, 100 workers. Right? So the way we would usually frame this entire piece of information together is LPNs benefiting the worker and the taxpayer, but there's some shorter term barriers that both the LPN and the CNA will face because of the benefits loss. So let me pause before I go back to the slides and see, are there any questions about the tool? Okay, doesn't look like any new questions have come in. All right. All right. So the tool we just saw, so how are our partners using this dashboard in their communities right now? The way we frame the dashboard version of this tool is primarily for community stakeholders, leaders of businesses, policymakers, and light touch career coaching. Stakeholders, as it says on the slide, can use this tool to inform policy and drive innovation to gain a better understanding of the ALIS population and these families' barriers to economic mobility. Right? Because again, once you start looking at public assistance, we only looked at one case today. Right? If we started to explore different cases based on the clients and families we serve, how are these benefits cliffs going to create barriers to moving workers successfully into these jobs that get workers above ALIS? Right? So again, the first stakeholder group I would suggest that can use this tool are the policymakers, businesses, funders, and other stakeholders. You can visualize exactly how these benefits cliffs interact with your local prioritized career paths. And as we just saw in the last section of the tool, estimate the net return to the taxpayer. Right? And it's an estimate, but it does provide some empirical support to your programs and how they do lead to a net impact, if you will. Second is career coaches and workers. We have a number of coaches that are using this tool around the country at the state level and the local level as a complement to career coaching. So one of of course, a very common approach to career coaching is you provide wage data, information about job openings, you provide job growth projections. This is a supplemental piece of information that you can provide that, number one, shows the path to that ALIS budget and the potential barriers in terms of benefits cliffs that the worker may face. So both of those use cases are actually being piloted right now around the country, including our partners at the United Way. And I'm excited to talk about a little bit more of the work. For anyone that wants to go more deeply into this tool and how it works and really become, if you will, an expert user in all the different ways this can be used, we do offer a free online training module that's called the Cliff Academy. Then I can distribute the link to this. You could sign up for the training, learn how to use the dashboard. So if you want to start talking about these issues in community presentations and other of your ALIS work and coaching, you can use this training module to learn how to do it. How are our community partners using this? This is just some variety of the issues, and this really connects to the presentation that started out today, is how can this tool be used, right? So number one, mapping benefits cliffs. So just having a concrete understanding in your area for the jobs either your organization, your workforce development, or economic development strategy prepares people for. How are the benefits cliffs going to actually impact that? Right? It's one thing to develop those plans in the context of assuming the workers are not on any public assistance. But once you start assuming public assistance enrollment, how does that change the picture? How does that change your strategy? Second is workforce development. We're working with a number of workforce development providers around the country that are using this in coaching, career pathway design, and really trying to think about how can we incorporate this perspective into our job training portfolio so workers can begin to actually take this into account. Why is that important, you may ask? So one of our partners, one of their key goals is client trust. This is just an example. Client trust. So their justification for using this kind of tool is we do not want to lose the trust of our clients. So when we're advising them about jobs, we want to make sure they're fully informed about the rewards and the risks of this choice. And to do that, you really need to have this kind of comprehensive tool to have that discussion. 3 is policy simulation and changes. Now, this tool can be easily adapted to include policy changes that are proposed. So if anyone on this call is interested in exploring policy change or programmatic change, wondering how that mitigates the benefits cliff, how that changes taxpayer return, we can work with you and simulate exactly how those changes would create a difference in Hawaii. And then finally, cross-system collaboration, community action, collective impact. Right, centering collective impact, or at least incorporating this benefits cliff information, so all these different stakeholders in the community, the employers, the job training providers, the nonprofit and funding community, are thinking at least about these benefits cliff issues and how they impede these goals of financial stability, economic mobility, so workers are not caught off guard by these losses or deterred from advancing in their career. I know that was a lot of information, everyone, and I apologize. I've had these internet connectivity issues today. But in summary, what I would just like to say is that the ALICE data is essential to work in this field, right? Because it provides this key measure of economic stability and survival, the basic needs budget. Of course, we have to begin to immediately ask when we look at ALICE is what jobs are going to get workers above that threshold. That's what the United Way wage tool does. So this tool will be useful in the following way for you, is when you're ready to extend that discussion about ALICE and wages to, well, what about for the workers we serve? The workers that are on public assistance. How can we think about their economic mobility path? And that's where this tool can help you leverage these insights as you develop your plans for these families. So thank you very much, and I will open it up again for any questions or other comments and pass it back to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you again to all of the coordination that we've had with our partners at the Federal Reserve Bank as well as with HUD. Wanted to open it up to everyone here. If you have any questions, you can drop it into the Q&A box, or if you use the raise hand feature, we can unmute you and you can ask out loud. In the meantime, too, just wanted to remind people to please also sign in. That way we can send you a copy of the presentation, as well as invite you to future training opportunities, as well as provide a link to the Cliff Academy. So if any questions, please go ahead and drop it in. But the main thing here is we are very, very excited about the potential for using this tool. Again, we're very hopeful that it provides a new resource for you to use with your program clients, in your program development, and with other partners as well, especially moving forward in this ALICE work. Yep, the sign-in sheet is there in the chat. Feel free to drop it in. And if no other questions, we'll just give one more second for anybody who wants to share any comments, any questions that you may have. But in the meantime, a very, very big mahalo again to Alex, who's with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, as well as Brittany Birkin, who has been working with us, and John Ford, who's at the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. And a huge thanks to Ramona Molehi, who is with HUD here locally and was one of the great conduits for us to get this started and get our information for the ALICE Hawaii tool, report, I'm sorry, into the tool. Thank you for the comments in the chat. We're really glad to be able to have had you here. And for anyone, I just wanted to share some news as we're coming to the close shortly here. Let's see, we do have one question that came in. Is the Cliff Academy the only link to the Cliff tool? Alex, do you want to answer some information about accessing the tool?
Yes, of course. So there's a couple ways. The main way to access the tool is going to be through the Aloha United Way website. That's where the Cliff tool is located. And I recommend, I think we're going to send out the link for that tool to everyone right after the webinar, so you can begin to explore the tool. If you have any questions, just feel free to email me and I can answer them. And we also have, by the way, a weekly open office hours for anyone that has questions about the data or the tool. You can drop in and ask questions about it. That's every Tuesday afternoon. The training, the Cliff Academy is really just for training on the tool. And it's a separate link, and we'll also include that. But to access the tool itself, I recommend the Aloha United Way website.
Thanks, Alex. And we will drop the link in the chat. So along with the tool that'll be hosted on our website, you can also see our previous report. We have some other reports for Alice that are coming out this upcoming year within the next few months. We also have an economic impact report for the COVID era that you can view as well. So hopefully that provides some good information for those of you here on the call. In the meantime, too, you can see the link there to the page on our website. Thank you again for being here. For many who know or may not know yet, this is my last week actually with Aloha United Way, and so I want to really acknowledge that Suzanne Scholl, our COO, will be spearheading a lot of this work moving forward, along with Jennifer Peacher, who is our current director of community impact. So for any questions that come up in the immediate future, please don't hesitate to reach out to them. In my future going forward, I'll continue to work with AUW very closely on this, but just not in this current role. So thank you all on this call as well for all of the many years of support and partnership that you've contributed here. With that said, I don't see any other questions coming in. Any final remarks, Suzanne or Alex?
I just want to add my thanks to everyone who attended and to Alex for the fantastic presentation. Really appreciate this partnership.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to invite everyone again to reach out with any other questions. I know in a virtual presentation, there's only so much anyone can take in with this much information. So do not hesitate to reach out for other questions.
Okay, thank you all for being here. And again, our information is here in the chat. You can visit us on our website and get all the reports, links to the information, and we will follow up with an email after this for everybody who's provided their sign-in information. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.